Paper Vows, Episode 5, The Seam, written by Mia. 3 weeks into my fake marriage, I woke up happy and lay very still in the most comfortable bed I had ever owned and was afraid. It had crept up on me, the happiness, the way the dangerous ones do, disguised as routine. There was a routine now. At 7, Adrian and I took the breakfast we were contractually obliged to perform, except we had both, somewhere along the way, stopped performing it. We just had breakfast and argued about the newspaper, and he had learned that I am useless before coffee and stopped trying to have opinions at me until I'd had it. At past, Pip came down in her uniform with her hair in the wonky plaits I was still learning to do, and Mr. Pomfrey supervised from the 4th chair, and Adrian Vale, who moved markets, drove his niece to school himself every morning now because she had asked him to once, in her small rusty voice, and he had rearranged a company around it without a word. There were 100 small things like that now, a whole secret architecture of them. He'd learned that Pip would eat vegetables only if they were hiding, so the most powerful man I had ever met had quietly mastered the disguised courgette. He kept a tin of the plasters with cartoon dogs on them in his briefcase, the side documents that decided the fates of companies, because Pip had grazed her knee once, and only the dog plasters would do. I'd caught him one evening sitting on the floor outside her door long after she'd gone to sleep, just listening to her breathe, the way you guard a thing you can't quite believe you're allowed to keep. He hadn't seen me, and I'd backed away and said nothing, because some things a person should be allowed to do unwatched, and because if I'd spoken I'd have said something true and unsurvivable, and we still had 11 months left of pretending I wouldn't. And Pip had started, that week, doing a thing that wrecked me every time. When something good happened, a goal at break, a gold star, she'd look around for someone to tell, and her eyes went first to me, then to Adrian, that fast, unthinking reflex of a child checking her people are still in the room. We were her people. 3 weeks, a colander, and a broken song, and we'd become the faces a grieving child looked for. You cannot put that in a contract. You cannot take it out of one either. We were, in every way that a watching world could measure, a family. The terrible thing, the thing I lay still and frightened about that morning, was that the watching world had nothing to do with it anymore. "You're thinking loudly," Adrian said, at breakfast, not looking up from the paper. "You do it with your whole face. It's very distracting." "I'm thinking that Pip's parents' evening is Thursday, and I don't know if I'm allowed to come." I said it lightly and watched it land heavily, which is the trouble with true things. They don't stay light. A wife would come, but I'm not. We never agreed what I am to her. On paper, I don't want to confuse her at the end of the year. The paper lowered. He looked at me across the table, across the wreckage of toast, with that still attention, and for a moment neither of us said the thing sitting in the middle of the table getting cold along with the eggs, that the end of the year had become a phrase we both flinched from, that we were 3 weeks into 12 months, and already neither of us could look directly at month 12. "Come to the parents' evening," he said finally. "She'd want you there. That's not contract. That's just true." And he went back to his paper, and I went back to my coffee, and we did the thing we were getting frighteningly good at, which was loving each other out loud in the grammar of small arrangements, and never once saying the word. It nearly broke that night, the way I'd known it would eventually. Pip was asleep. We'd done the new ritual. Adrian played her the song, Better Now. Only one wrong note left, and he left it in on purpose because she decided it was the good wrong one, and she'd gone down easy, and Adrian and I had ended up in the dim music room the way we kept ending up places. 2 people who'd run out of audience and hadn't quite worked out what they were when no one was watching. I was showing him a better fingering for the bridge of the little tune. My hands over his on the keys, the way they'd been the first night. Except the first night we'd been strangers, and now we were whatever we were, and 3 weeks of breakfasts and plates and a sleeping child down the hall were in the room with us. And when I leaned in to reach the low notes, I felt him go absolutely still, and I looked up and he was already looking at me, close, too close, the wall down, his eyes on my mouth. Esme. Barely a sound. A warning to himself more than to me. I know, I whispered. Clause 4. Clause 4, he agreed and didn't move, and the not moving was louder than any kiss, his cold hand gone warm under mine, his breath unsteady. Adrian Vale, unsteady, and I understood that we were 1 inch and one bad decision from setting fire to the only thing keeping the gallery and his niece and our whole careful house standing, and that I wanted to strike the match so badly my hands shook on the piano keys. Neither of us breathed. Down the hall, a child slept who had, that very afternoon, called me Esme without the wariness for the first time, and the whole impossible house seemed to hold its breath around us. The glass and the river light and the contract upstairs in its drawer, all of it waiting to see whether the 2 adults at its center were going to be sensible. His gaze dropped to my mouth and stayed, and I felt it like a touch. Tell me to stop, he said, rough. And it wasn't an order, it was the opposite. A man holding a door shut from the inside and begging someone to help him hold it. Tell me clause 4, Esme. I need to hear you say it, because I can't seem to. Clause 4. I said again, and meant the opposite, and we both heard the opposite, and for one more endless second neither of us moved. It was Pip who saved us, in the end. Without ever knowing it, a small turned-over sleep sound from down the hall, the exact reminder of the thing we were both there to protect. He pulled back first. He always would in the beginning. I should. He stood, putting the air back, rebuilding the wall with visibly unsteady hands. Good night, Esme. You're allowed to want things, Adrian, I said to his retreating back, because I am incapable of leaving a true thing unsaid. It's not actually against the law, just against the contract. And you wrote the contract, which means you're allowed to. I'm not, he said, not turning around, and there was something raw and final under it that stopped me. I'm really not, Esme. Not with you. You'll understand why before the year's out, and you'll be glad I didn't. Good night. And he was gone, and I sat alone at the piano with my heart pounding and a new splinter under my ribs. You'll understand why. As though there were a reason. As though the clause wasn't caution, but confession. I should have chased that thread. I didn't get the chance, because the next morning the war arrived in person, and it was wearing a beautiful coat and holding 2 coffees. Marcus Vale was waiting outside the gallery when I went to check on it, leaning against the railings of my mother's 2 narrow rooms as though he owned the street, which he probably could have by lunchtime. I brought you a coffee, he said, holding one out. Flat white. You strike me as a flat white. I'd have brought elderflower, but it felt aggressive. He smiled. I did not take the coffee. You're wondering how I know about the elderflower. That's the right thing to wonder. You're a quick study, Esme. I keep telling Adrian he's underestimated you. He thinks he hired warmth. I think he hired something with teeth and hasn't noticed yet. What do you want, Marcus? Due diligence. He set the rejected coffee on the railing and drew a slim folder from inside his coat, unhurried, a man who has never once had to rush. I do it on everything Adrian acquires. Companies, property, wives. He didn't hand it to me. He just let me see the tab. It said Hart, E. The Hart Gallery. Mortgaged to 11% over its value. A foreclosure notice dated the 3rd. And the debt cleared in full. The entire debt Esme, every penny on the 14th, the day before your wedding. He looked up, pleasant, lethal. You married my cousin on the 15th. You'd known him by the official story 11 months. By the gallery's bank records, you'd known him about 9 days. The street was very loud and very far away. I kept my face still. 3 weeks of breakfast had taught me how Adrian did it and said, people fall in love fast. It happens. It does. It just doesn't usually clear a 6-figure debt the day before the register office. He slid the folder back into his coat. I'm not going to the papers, in case that's where your stomach's gone. The papers are crude. I'm going to the family trust and the trust's lawyers, and this is the part I'd think very hard about if I were you, the family court. He let that sit. He was good. He let it sit exactly long enough. Adrian's custody of the child is provisional. The court granted it on the strength of a stable married home. If that home is demonstrably a transaction, a woman bought out of foreclosure to play house for a year, then the home isn't stable, it's staged, and a staged home is grounds to reconsider where Pip lives. With, for instance, blood relatives who actually want her, such as me. His smile did not waver. I don't want the child, Esme.
God, no.
But I want the trust to see that Adrian's judgment can't be relied on, and a fraudulent marriage and a misled court is a very efficient way to show them that. The child's just where the seam happens to be.
I'm sorry about that.
I am a little. For a moment I couldn't speak, because he had found the one threat that actually worked. Not the gallery. I'd have handed him the gallery before I let him watch me flinch.
Pip.
He had reached past me and Adrian and the contract and the trust and laid his manicured hand directly on the one thing none of us could afford to lose. The small grave-faced child who had decided 3 weeks ago that this house would not disappear. I thought of her at the piano saying the good wrong one. I thought of her asking whether you could restore people. And something happened to me that I think surprised us both. The warmth went somewhere very cold and very clear. The place my mother used to go the one time a landlord tried to frighten her. A place I hadn't known I'd inherited. You keep saying the child like she's a square on a board, I said quietly. Her name is Pip. Say her name, Marcus. Say it while you tell me you'd put her through another disappearance to win a point off your cousin.
Go on.
Say it with her name in it.
He didn't.
That told me something. It just didn't tell me enough. I did not fold. I want that on the record, the way I wanted the not looking away at my father's, no. Wrong story. The way I'd promised Adrian I wouldn't, in another life, 3 weeks ago, when this was still a job. You've made a mistake, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I had any right to.
2, actually.
The first is that you think the marriage is fake. I looked him dead in his clever, patient eyes, and I told him the most useful kind of lie, which is the one that has become true while you weren't looking. I married a stranger for a gallery. I'm staying for a man who drives his niece to school and taught himself the piano so she wouldn't be frightened. And I dare you, genuinely, Marcus, I dare you, to stand in front of a family court and prove that what's in that house isn't real. You'll be proving a negative against a woman who does plates and a child who stopped flinching. You'll lose, and you'll have shown the trust that your read on people is exactly as bad as your cousin says it is. Something flickered in his face. I'd landed it, but Marcus Vale had not got where he was by being landed once. And the second mistake, he said lightly. You brought this to me instead of him. I stepped closer, because you wanted to frighten the soft one into running before she costs you anything. But I grew up watching my mother keep a failing gallery open on nothing but stubbornness and love. Marcus, and stubbornness and love are the 2 things your folder can't price. So, here's my due diligence on you. I picked up the coffee he brought and I took a sip because it was a good flat white and I wasn't going to waste it, and I said, "You're going to lose this. Not because you're wrong about the 14th, because you're wrong about the rest of it. Thank you for the coffee." And I walked into my mother's gallery and shut the door and stood in the gold afternoon light with my heart slamming and my hands shaking, and the whole bottom dropped out of everything because it was a magnificent bluff and I'd sold it, but a bluff is all it was, and Marcus had a date on a bank statement that was true. And somewhere across the city, a 7-year-old was at school believing for the first time in 14 months that she'd landed somewhere that wouldn't disappear. He could take her. That was the thing standing in the gold light with me. Not he could embarrass Adrian. He could take Pip. And the only thing standing between a grieving child and another disappearance was a marriage that had to be real enough to survive a courtroom, which meant I now had a legal, urgent, child-shaped reason to stop pretending I wasn't in love with my husband, and a clause in clean, dull English that said doing so would cost more than a gallery. "You'll understand why before the year's out," Adrian had said. "You'll be glad I didn't." I was starting to be very afraid of what he knew that I didn't. To be continued. That was episode 5 of Paper Vows. If Esme and Adrian have your heart, the next episode is already waiting. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The complete book is on Amazon, and early episodes plus bonus scenes are on my Patreon. Links are in the description.
I've Mia.
Thank you for listening.